Hi, everybody. This is Lori, and I wanted to talk today about mental illness. And I think probably a lot of people, or maybe everybody, suffers some degree of mental illness. I think what I noticed early in life was memory problems. Like when I was 5 and I was nervous in church and I was going to read something out of a little book. And I honestly, at the end of it, didn't remember if I thought I stood there and didn't open my mouth and didn't say anything. And there's so many times since then that people wished that I had done that. But my parents told me that I did, but I had no memory of that. I honestly thought I just stood there. Um, More remarkably, when I was 12, I turned my own purse into the lost and found at a hotel we were vacationing at. I didn't recognize it. I woke up next to it and thought, wow, somebody's purse is sitting there. I had no idea it was mine. And then I had a full on breakdown when I was 13 or 14 years old. And there was disassociation. I didn't remember. It wasn't like multiple personalities. It was like disassociating from a emotion, or it's almost like part of me was extremely upset and part of me really wasn't very upset, and there was probably a handful of levels of that. And despite the fact that in the hospital they over medicated me, I was 14, I think, just barely 14. And despite that, I think I'm thankful that they did like a team treatment, and there were, despite that it was a hick hospital in a hick area back in the 70s, I think they did do a certain amount of therapy in that. I don't know what would have happened to me if it was a handful of days and then I couldn't take it. I had to get out of there, and talk to my mom into fishing me out. And I was aware at that point that I was switching over to different emotions and that I didn't have a memory of everything I did. My psychologist said I had stress-induced fugue states. Later on, they called it dissociative anxiety. And my first psychologist there also told me that I had PTSD, but that it wasn't a label that they could use for my insurance. So he called me schizophrenic, but he sat down and explained to me that he did not believe I was schizophrenic. Unfortunately, that meant that that was the medication they had to give me. I'm almost sure I probably got more therapy than I would have if I had been, just being schizophrenic. That's almost just like one of those disorders where allegedly you need a extra chemical on your brain or some kind of thing like that. What I was going through was something that actually required a lot of treatment. I was jumping back to when I was 2 after my sister died, and I couldn't sleep, so I wouldn't go to bed. I was afraid to tell my parents. So I would stand up in the middle of the room, sometimes most of the night. I've had insomnia my whole life, and I don't know if it's because she died in the night while she was sleeping, or and I knew about it. My brother was 1 and I was 2.5, so he, I don't think he was as scarred by that at the time because he didn't remember it. He was 1. And whereas I saw my parents reacting, my mother full on painting angels and, being very upset for a period of many months, and I was upset. So my dad was upset. But so I don't know. There's that, and I think to a degree, my dad was really strict with me at a point where I was really sensitive and kind of breaking down. I may be autistic. I haven't knowingly had that label, but I suspect, and that on top of everything else, I was probably having a crisis. Um, I felt like I had always been who I was, kind of, and that I hit teen years and um, I didn't understand why my peers wanted what they wanted. Um, I was just like, it didn't make sense to me. Drugs didn't make sense, and you know, I really wasn't hip to for relationships or anything. Um, I just wanted to be the same as I was. I didn't really want to turn into, um, you know, hyper hormone acne girl. But, I'm going to leave that for another day. But, so yeah, I've always kind of been different than everybody. Off and on, I had therapy. Um, so I had a couple kids when I was, one when I was 17 and one when I was 23 by two different dads. And I was married to the first one and then eventually to the second one, where I'm not married now. But um, I can kind of see where later in life, your kids are your friends and then they're your parents, kind of, like I feel like my daughter is kind of like a mom in some ways, and my son is kind of like a dad might be. So it's really weird the way that works. I suggest it because I don't know what I would be doing right now if I didn't have mom and dad, um, in the form of my kids, and all those years where I had them as friends. That was all those walks to the library to feed the ducks and reading books together and watching the Love Boat. I don't know. I don't know what my life would have been. But so yeah, I had this really traumatic time. I can still bottom out. The If my PTSD gets triggered, I'm a goner. It's very bad. So it's like you don't just feel a little bit down, you can go all the way down. That's a really dark place. And then you think the worst will happen, whatever is happening when that happens. It's very bad. And then when I'm up, I don't get that high up, um, usually, because you know I just don't. So I mean, I can be up and happy, and simple things can make me happy too. But I try really hard not to get mad, and I try not to, like I looked my ex up the other day. I hadn't done that for months, and I said some shitty thing on his Facebook. He'd said, um, there was a bogus him out there, like someone was stole his information and was being him and contacting people and doing things. And I went and said, "Oh, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. There's a bogus him." Well, meaning that he's bogus. And of course, all he did that I was aware of was just block me or whatever, which is understandable. But it really pissed me off, and it brought me back to a really dark place, because he abused our child and got away with it, of course. This after telling me he had done things to her without saying what. But that's a long story too. That's for another day. maybe that's not my story to tell, actually. I think my daughter does deserve a apology from him, and that's one thing she said not that long ago, and I do think she deserves an apology. I've apologized for not being smart enough to that I was with him in the first place, and then in the second place that I didn't want to believe that that was happening. So, denial and everything. We weren't together at that time. He had her on visitation. But again, that's not my story. So I think after that brief time of a lot of therapy at the hospital when I was 14, I think a lot of the psychologists and people that dealt with me more were looking to just throw me out into the world as I was and have me just, make my own way, my own defenses. I probably had help now and then other times the opposite of that. I didn't get any SSI or anything when I was young, or for 2 decades of raising kids that off and on we didn't have. Like, I might have made enough money for the rent and that was it, and no electric, no, I drove cars that were illegal because I couldn't fix them right, or like it took all my money to get the car. And I can't say I'm avoidant and that I'm not social, because I love to be social. We know each other, so we just pick up where we left off kind of level. So it's a good thing I have family. I've made some acquaintances here and there. When I hung out in Reno off and on, they were mostly drug addicts, so alcoholics, or people that were a lot more interested in their drug dealer. So, and then when you hung out with people who were laying off of the substances, they'd be in a bad mood all the time. So that wasn't really fun. And then when you go to church, it's like they tend to act like they know things you don't know, or they're better than you, or smarter, or richer, or that if you don't have anything, it's because you were bad and you're being punished. Or, I just don't believe any of that. And I mean, I think too that I didn't have enough self-awareness to ever be dating. Like, all these therapists that I had, and nobody sat me down and said, and made sure that before I go dating or go out in the world, that I know what might be involved, even on a minimal level, because I wasn't really hip for the program. So, I was trying to do things that really I couldn't do. That it would be destructive to try. And due to my lack of I was encouraged to have a lack of self-awareness, just like a pocket full of lies in my pocket, about who I really was and, what was wrong with me. Because if you walk around going, oh, well, I have memory problems and I have intimacy problems and all these problems. So you're not going to try really to get close to anybody or work a job but on the other hand, that's probably where it was at. I did go to Social Security when I was, 18 or 19, and this old lady comes out, and it was the office where they deal with everything in the county that I lived in. And she said, we don't have any programs. Just when you retire, that's the only program. And that wasn't true. They did have, SSI. And I knew there was something because all the other girls at the mental hospital, at the child care and treatment center in Steilacoom, actually were getting something that nobody helped me to get. I never saw a social worker. They all had a social worker. I didn't have one. I was there for a couple months. So maybe I don't know how long you have to be there to get any of that, but I rarely saw anyone. And I almost think that my problems were so bad that they thought, well, the only way to deal with her without putting a lot of time into it would be to not focus on that and just see how she wobbles around. And I mean, mostly I think that's where it was with me. But I don't really believe I'm stupid exactly. I think in some ways my IQ is pretty high, but if you have fugue states when you experience stress, you're likely to forget your name or I mean, so there I was as a data conversion operator, my first day on the floor, and the most basic information would be what you do when your screen goes idle. Well, I think it is you simply wait for more mail to come up. And I lost it. I was a nervous wreck. I had just tested onto the floor, and I turned to the guy next to me and I said, "What do you do when your screen goes idle?" And what he should have said is, nothing. You just wait. More mail will pop up. Instead of that, he said, "Sign off and go home." So, because he's not a nice person. And so I did. And so my very first day, after all the testing and waiting and learning and testing onto the floor, I should have been fired for that. But so that's an example of what the memory thing would do. When I was probably 24, I was typesetting the local college paper in Clark County, Washington, and I couldn't type the word hors d'oeuvres. It was so bad. Like the whole paper was done. It was the last of the senior edition or whatever. And I finally got somebody from there standing behind me, spelling it letter for letter, and I still couldn't do it. I don't know why. Something was very wrong with me. My psychologist went to my parents when I was after the hospital and told them that I was psychic. I think he'd been looking up what he thought was my astrology, and he told them that. And that he said that's part of the problem, like hypersensitive person in a cruel world kind of a story. Well, I mean, it was a cruel household at times, so I can see where, I think he wanted them to treat me nicer. I think he thought, if I got along better with them, then, I don't really know what all went wrong with that concept. They liked my brother a lot more. My brother was easy to get along with. He had a sense of humor. I wasn't the popular one, obviously. I was in foster care for a few weeks at one point. I was, I think too, my dad was unemployed when I was 14, and he got really touchy and sensitive and worried. And like if I did some dumb thing, he'd hyper react. Like I ate the last piece of cheese. I was just this skinny little thing. He got really mad. And anyway, I ended up in juvie and in the child care and treatment center at that point. I believe I was 15 when that happened. And I did some first jobs when I was 15. I picked strawberries, and I realized I wasn't making any money and that it was too hard. So I started giving them to the Mexican guy. He was older, and I called him Papa and gave him all my strawberries. And then I lied about my age. I found out my friends from the neighborhood in Vancouver were working at a nursing home in the kitchen. And I thought, well, maybe that's something I could do, you know. And so I lied about my age. I was 15. I said I was 16. And I thought, you know, it'd be cool to be a dietitian with them in the kitchen. But they stuck me on the night ward on the worst floor of that nursing home. But so I did that for a little while. It was kind of scary and depressing. And those old people kept jumping out of their clothes and peeing in the corner. And it wasn't my idea of a success story. I mean, there was no way I was going to look back to that and call it a success at all. But so the first mental hospital when I was 14, I really liked that place. I can't even, I mean, it's like, I felt like nobody was going to beat me up there. Like I wasn't going to get myself, you know, get everybody mad at me in there. But then I wasn't really aware of every time I cried out or anything like that. So who knows how irritating I was. And after a few days of that, I noticed I was hyper medicated. I went down in the bathroom, like I fainted, but you know, almost fainted and went down kind of thing. And I thought at that point, this is dangerous. This is absolutely dangerous. And you know, I could fall and hit my head and die in here. So I sought to get out of there. But I did go back to it a couple of times, and I wasn't as vulnerable or as open to it. I wasn't, you know, so I don't know how therapeutic it was at that point. It was it wasn't the same um, experience for me, and I think they knew that. That's why they didn't really want me to leave in the first place the first time. But so, yeah, I still don't know for sure what was wrong with me or what's wrong with me now. I suspect something like, um, you know, autism um, with PTSD and stress induced fugue or memory states. So, of course, I'm older now, so they'll just say, oh, well, you're old, your mind is gone, or we don't care about you now, or whatever. But they didn't really care that much about me then. So it's not a big difference, people. Um, but yeah, I don't think people with memory problems should really work in nursing homes. I did stuff like leave the old man with his shaver kind of thing and went home. And then I got home and went, oh my God. Um, I guess it all worked out okay, but that scared the bejesus out of me. I tried nursing homes a few times, but I became a typesetter, a typist. I'm really not that good a typist when I was 15. And I mean, there were always mistakes. I wasn't the cleanest typesetter anybody ever saw. I was better at like tabulated material or, you know, like data entry where you're doing addresses and that kind of thing. When I worked for the USPS, you were just typing in the information the machine needed, and they trained your body to do it. So it's almost like you're still reading the Reader's Digest, and your fingers do the walking. So it's not the same as having, you know, constantly typing stories. But at one point, I did all of the Clark County high schools and the college, the Thrifty Nickel, and the Swedish newspaper. And then you'd be off in the summer. Most of them would lay out, not the Thrifty Nickel or the Swedish newspaper, but I mean, it was good experience, and it was good for my self-esteem. Well, okay, I made a few bucks, but I don't really feel like it led anywhere. If there had been a book publishing company, or where you type in information for Yellow Pages, I think that would have been, but Vancouver, Washington is not New York, so. But maid work was okay, but I didn't do the alone thing very well. It was creepy, and I was always afraid. It kind of scared me. So I delivered newspapers for a while with mixed results. Delivering the Thrifty Nickel was good, and the other ones were bad. What would I suggest to a young mentally ill person? I would suggest ask yourself how much you really enjoy the step-by-step of making out with someone, whether it's, the same sex or the opposite sex. I can't believe how many therapists didn't encourage me to know myself and or to understand the reality of a situation. They just kind of wanted me bumbling in and following along or something. And that doesn't make any sense, because a lot of what happened in my life that was so hard or bad or whatever was because I tried things that really I wasn't ready to do. And I was too achievement oriented. I felt like, that I wasn't worthy of anything if I didn't achieve something. But there's artistic ways a person could do that as well. You don't have to literally pound rocks all day, or, it'd be nice to think, in a way, it's nice to think that you want what your peers want, but it has to be okay if you don't. And really, you never stop being a parent. And if you have a child that's unusual in a lot of ways, and maybe it's not all illness, maybe some of it's just oddities or something, then you would think that you wouldn't push them out when they get to be 17 or 15 years old. Because what are they going to do out there? There was nowhere to go. I didn't have anywhere to go. And you ever feel like your parents kind of went, "We don't like you," but they made you, right? It's like God created me and you created me. You can't hate that, right? I'm sure I had lovable attributes. I don't know what they are right off. Well, anyways, I just wanted to talk about mental illness because I'm not in treatment right now, and I really wish I was. Not in hospital particularly, but I wish I had a therapist who knew what I was going through and could give me some feedback here and there, because I wish I had had that when I had it too. But very often that wasn't what was happening. So I wish you all luck in the world, and if you have problems, I hope there's someone to help you, whether that's your therapist or your friend or anyone that is. So, love you guys. Okay, we'll talk later. Bye.